A mixed close on Wall Street in overnight session. The Dow Jones closes nearly 50 points lower, while the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq eke out minor gains as investors gear up for big tech earnings this week. The two-day FOMC meeting also begins today. Stocks in the Asia-Pacific trade lower as investors await cue from the Bank of Japan's two-day meeting that begins today. The GIFT Nifty is also suggesting a muted start for the Indian markets. Crude prices have slipped. The Brent is now trading below $80 a barrel as demand concerns offset the risk of lower supply due to tensions in West Asia. An uptick in the dollar is also weighing on gold prices. ACC reports first quarter numbers that were in line with expectations. Volumes come in a little better than expected. HPCL, on the other hand, misses estimates, while Colgate-Palmolive sees a beat on all parameters. And in key earnings today, Tata Consumer will report first quarter results. Revenue is seen higher at 17% on a year-on-year basis, while for Indian Oil Corporation, it is expected to be a weak quarter. Also watch out for numbers from GAIL and Dixon Technologies. It's a Tuesday morning. You're watching Power Breakfast here on CNBC TV 18 in the Mumbai News Center. I am Hormuz Fatakia. Let's first take a look at how the Asian markets are faring this morning. And it's a slightly negative start. It's possibly due to the lack of cues as well from Wall Street. The Wall Street session was absolutely muted. We'll get to that in just a bit. But the Asian markets are trading lower. You can see the Hang Seng now down 0.9%. The Taiwanese index also trading with losses of close to 1%. All eyes are, of course, on the Bank of Japan. The two-day meeting begins today. The Japanese indices are also down 0.7% as we speak. The Shanghai Composite is down 0.6% as well. And the Hang Seng is now extending losses now to almost 1%. So it's a negative start across the Asia Pacific. And pull up the GIFT Nifty as well, and that will give you a picture of how the Indian markets are likely to open. You can see a slight downtick in today's session. 70 points lower is what the implied open is suggesting after we came tantalizingly close to 25,000 yesterday, and we saw a bit of a pullback towards the close of trade yesterday. The implied open is suggesting a slightly further pullback now from the close of yesterday. So a negative start across Asia, and the implied open also suggesting a weak start for our own markets. But on Wall Street, it was a muted session, but it was mixed at the final close. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq eked out small gains as investors are now gearing up for the corporate earnings this week of the big tech companies. The Dow Jones, however, gained close to lost over 50 points and was an underperformer yesterday. The Tesla gained over 5% after brokerage firm Morgan Stanley crowned the electric vehicle maker as its top pick among the auto stocks. Now, on the earnings front, Microsoft, Meta, Apple and Amazon are all set to report their quarterly earnings this week. The Federal Reserve's two-day meeting also begins today. Now, the Fed is expected to maintain its benchmark interest rate unchanged in the current range of 5.25% to 5.5%. Now, CNBC's Steve Leisman has the key expectations from the FOMC.
This is widely viewed as the meeting before the meeting where they cut, with the question being, how much guidance does the Fed and Chair Powell provide for what could be rate decreases in September and beyond? The statement for several months has said the committee does not expect it will be appropriate to reduce the target range until it has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably towards 2%. Now creating the opportunity for the Fed to change the statement to indicate it has gained some greater confidence as a result of those recent declines you can see in the monthly inflation rates. Markets go into this meeting with a 100% probability of a cut priced in for September, 69 for a second cut in November, followed by a 65% probability of a third cut come December. And Treasury markets, they were on the move this morning in a pretty big way, with about an 8 basis point decline in the 10-year yield, now down to 4.17 and change. Investors may be looking to lock in those higher long-term rates before the Fed starts to shake things up with rate cuts. Powell and the Fed can be expected, I think, tread kind of carefully here, not promise too much before they have to, ahead of a lot of data coming, obviously, this week and before the September meeting. But in part, this is a problem of the Fed's own making, since Powell has talked about cuts as a process, meaning once they start cutting, they can be expected to keep going. And that, folks, is how the market is priced. Back to y'all.
Let's also now listen in to some important opinion that's coming in from experts on the rate cut expectations from the Federal Reserve and the overall inflation outlook.
Look, I think the cut probably comes in September. It's what the market is priced in. I think the data on balance would support that. And if they're not going to do it, they're going to have to signal pretty clearly and push back hard against the market. So count me in the camp of many that September's likely the first move. We see inflation itself stable or coming down. Goods prices, which are an important part of this, given that services are relatively sticky, good prices have been moving in the right direction from their standpoint. And we're also seeing, some beginning of weakness in consumers. The consumer sentiment numbers from Michigan were relatively weak. So I think there's enough evidence for them to go ahead and cut unless there's something dramatically different in between.
We've got an economy that's generating solid GDP growth. We got inflation coming down. Inflation has come down without a recession. It was widely thought that a recession would be necessary to bring inflation down. We've gotten through that narrow path of inflation coming down without a recession here. And the Fed, for some reason, has signaled that they are definitely going to deliver us a quarter-point cut in September, when it may not actually be necessary. And we had something that felt like a melt up until July 16th, which was the all-time record high in the S&P 500. I don't think we want to go there again by having the Fed be too aggressively easy when the economy doesn't need it.
I think the FOMC will almost surely leave policy rate unchanged this week on Wednesday, as it waits to gain greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably towards 2%. This week, we don't expect a change to the forward guidance. We don't see any upside, frankly, for the Fed to change its forward guidance. If you look, as I mentioned, the data still looks strong. The market already anticipates a cut, has pretty much fully priced in a cut plus some more, later this year. I think we have about nearly 70 basis point priced in by December. So I think there is no upside for the Fed to commit to a cut in September at this point.
And that's all we have on the global market action. But how will all of these overnight cues impact our own markets? We have our research team joining in with how the trade setup looks like, the stocks that you need to watch out for, and of course the FNO setup as well. First up, Vivek joins in to get all the market cues we need to watch out for. Vivek, good morning. 0.2 points away from 25,000, but the setup looks a little weak today.
Well, you're right. Missing it by a whisker is what we actually saw. Now, when you're talking about how the handover was, global markets very mixed, very flat handover, and all eyes will be on the Fed meet outcome. It starts today, tomorrow, end of day, as far as US market is concerned, is when the outcome will come. Oil price is something that we will keep track of, and oil prices actually have continued to slip further. And Brent yesterday was down over 1.6%. Indian markets, like you mentioned, missing the 25,000 mark. But actually, what's happened is that post that, all of the indices, especially the benchmark indices, the Nifty and Nifty Bank, saw quite a bit of selling pressure. And today it'll be important to see whether we try and attempt to scale the 25,000 peak once again. But it looks a little tough given the fact that GIFT Nifty as well as Asian market indicating a slightly muted start. What did well yesterday, the broader markets outperformed. The entire PSU pack did very well. Both banks as well as OMCs did very well. However, one tricky aspect was the fact that India VIX yesterday was up almost 7%. A lot of results reactions today, numbers that came in post-market hours yesterday, Colgate, Palmolive, HPCL, KEI Industries, Kalpataru. Today, what is it that we'll be watching in terms of results? Tata Consumer, IRCL, Indus Tower, Exide. A big block deal is expected, PNB Housing. And like we mentioned, a muted start is what we're anticipating today.
Muted start indeed, and it was because of that selling pressure we saw in a lot of these heavyweight constituents is what led the Nifty lower from those levels of 25,000. Over to Vamakshi now, who would list out the stocks you need to watch out for this morning. Vamakshi, good morning.
Well, good morning, Hormaz. A whole list of stocks in focus today. Let me first start off with ACC. In the first quarter, sales volume at 10.2 million tons came in higher than what we were expecting. Net profit, however, was down nearly 23% YOY. HPCL's revenue was flat, but the margins have contracted substantially from 4.2% as seen in the last quarter to 1.9%. Net profit resultantly is seeing a sharp fall of almost 88%. Colgate, on the other hand, reported an improvement in its margins to 34%. Net profit also came in higher by almost 33% at 364 crores. Jindal SAW reported a huge uptick in its margins from 13.8%. The margins have now risen to 17%. The net profit at 441 crores has also come in nearly 67% higher. Jindal Drilling reported a very strong set of numbers. Revenue is seeing an uptick of almost 82%, and the net profit has surged by almost 2.6 times. declines on a YOY basis. Pfizer's, the margin has expanded from 20.9% to 31.5%, and the net profit has come in nearly 61% higher. PNB Housing will be in focus on the back of a block deal. Sources suggest that Carlyle Group Quality Investment Holdings PCC is likely to sell about 6.5% stake in the company via block deals, and the offer size is pegged at 1,255 crores. And lastly, let's watch out for ITD Cementation. The company has received an order worth 1,237 crores, and this is for construction of a residential colony in New Delhi.
Block deals are back after a bit of a lull. Vamakshi, thanks a lot for that update. And lastly, Sudarshan now joins in with cues from the FNO space. Sudarshan, good morning. What's the setup on the FNO side looking like?
Morning, Hamas. So what we saw yesterday, it looked like a pure algo setup near the 25,000 levels. But fall from the highs was severe, and at the end, we managed to close near flat line, or say at day's low. But what did FIs do? In the cash market, they were sellers, but in futures, especially in index futures, they continue to remain on the buy side. They have sold shares of nearly rupees 2,500 crore in the cash market, but it was offset by DIs, which bought shares of nearly rupees 6,000 crore. In futures, we saw FIs cutting long positions by nearly 5,000 contracts. At the same time, they have reduced short positions by 24,000 contracts as well. But interesting data is coming from the option side, where we saw major selling by FIs. In the index option, they have sold shares of nearly rupees 11,600 crore, and in stock options, shares worth rupees 1,200 crore were sold. At the same time, long exposure has moved higher, mainly because of FIs buying in the index futures. Long exposure now stands at 65%, with total long contracts at 1.50 lakhs. In the options, the data reflects major congestion in the range of 24,900 to 25,000. 25,000 call, we saw addition of 22 lakh shares with a premium at 57, and for 24,950 call, we saw addition of 7 lakh shares with a premium of 74. In the put side, major activities were seen in 24,950 and 24,900 strikes. So where are the support and resistance levels for Nifty now? Resistance is, again, it remains around 25,000, and support is now moved higher to the level of 24,800, or can say to the near previous day's low. So what all stocks will be in the focus? We have India Cements in the band, and two stocks that I'll focus on. First one is Bandhan Bank, and second is PNB. For Bandhan Bank, yesterday we saw delivery buying of almost 700 crore, which is 3 times of 1 month average. And for PNB, delivery buying was 650 crore, almost again 3 times of 1 month average.
Interesting updates there, Sudarshan. Thanks a lot for that. The time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, we get you highlights from the Reserve Bank's annual report on currency and finances. Stay tuned. Back on the other side. Welcome back. The Reserve Bank's annual report on currency and finances for FY24 points out that India's digital economy, currently estimated at 1/10 of the country's GDP, is poised to constitute 1/5 of the GDP by 2026. Now, themed India's digital revolution finds that the volume of paper clearing has plummeted, while that of digital transactions has soared by over 50%. Ritu Singh is standing by with the highlights as well as the findings of the RBI survey on the state of digital adoption by merchants and consumers alike. Ritu.
The phenomenon that is digital payments is all too well captured in RBI's latest report, pointing to a 52% growth in the volume of digital transactions and 12% growth in the value of these transactions in just the last decade. Take a look at the statistics. The number of transactions per capita of the population has gone up from 0.2 in FY06 to 114 as of FY24, with the average value of these transactions rising from 40,000 rupees to 16.8 lakh rupees. At the same time, the share of the volume of paper clearing has plummeted to 0.4% as of FY24 in total retail payments from nearly 82% in FY06. And not surprisingly, UPI dominated retail digital payments with a near 80% share in total volumes. That was helped by 424 million unique users. And to put that in perspective, it is roughly 1/3 of India's population using UPI today. In value terms, of course, other modes like NEFT still dominate. But what is perhaps the most heartening takeaway from this is that digital adoption is not just concentrated in the metros, with over half of fintech consumers today coming from semi-urban and rural India, and more than a third of digital payment users from rural parts. A quick word on RBI's survey to assess the adoption of digital across both merchants and consumers, where the report finds that the awareness about digital payments is much higher when it comes to merchants when they compare it to consumers. The adoption level was lower among consumers at just 42%, having used any of the digital modes at least once in their lifetime. Similarly, about 36% of consumers were current users of any of the digital payment modes in India. There were higher users among males when compared to females, and of course, no doubt, COVID has been a big catalyst, with 60% of the merchants observing an uptick in digital payments following the pandemic, and 4 in every 10 consumers reporting that they only started using digital payments after the pandemic.
Ritu Singh, thanks a lot for all of those updates there from the RBI report. Time for a short break. Up next, we get you all the highlights from the Olympics that are underway in Paris. Stay tuned, back on the other side. Welcome back, and day 4 of the Paris Olympics is all set for game, and India hopes to win big today. Our reporter Sanjay Suri joins us from Paris to give us a detailed rundown on what to expect and whom to watch out for in today's key sporting events.
Day 4 coming up, and India could be looking at another medal, and again from Manu Bhaker, this time in the company of Sarabjot Singh, and that would be in the 10-meter mixed air pistol event. They qualified for that bronze medal match on Monday, and they'll be up against the South Korean team. But not all shooters have got through. Arjun Babuta missed out so very narrowly. He took 4th place in the 10-meter air rifle finals. He started well, he was going great, and then he wobbled a bit at the end. He broke down after that, and it would have been difficult under the circumstances not to have. In the women's air rifle event, Ramila Jindal finished at 7th position. Rhythm Sangwan and Arjun Singh Chima were eliminated. But further now, again on Tuesday, Indian shooters Shreyasi Singh and Rajeshwari Kumari will be in the trap women's qualification round 1. Prithviraj Tondeman will be in the trap men's qualification round 2. Indians, one has to say, are proving somewhat better at shooting with the gun than with the good old bow and arrow. The Indian team lost to Turkey in the men's archery quarterfinals, but a number of individual competitions on Tuesday could still hold out a good deal of hope for India in archery. In the badminton, women's doubles, Ashwani Ponappa and Tanisha Krasto lost out to the Japanese. They have a final chance of staying in the contest when they play the Australians on Tuesday. The earlier Satwik Chirag double event was cancelled because of an injury to one of the players on the other side, and the two will now play Indonesia on Tuesday. In rowing, another surprise and promising event, Balraj Panwar will be there to watch. He'll be doing the single sculls quarterfinals. In equestrian, do watch out for Anush Agarwala with his horse Sir Caramello Old, India's daring adventure into dressage. It'll be a very determined Anush that we'll see. He's put everything he could and more into dressage. Later also on Tuesday, we have some very promising rounds in boxing with Preeti Pawar. She has shown her performance already. Amit Pangal, Jasmine, and then not least, who has the nerve to watch what could be another hockey thriller, this one against Ireland. On Monday, India were trailing against Argentina until that last gasp equalizer from Harmanpreet Singh. It was also in the very last stages of that earlier match with New Zealand that India had pulled off that winning goal. This time it was the late but precious equalizer. Both times it was Harmanpreet Singh who scored. So India take on Ireland with some confidence that they can keep their game and their nerve right to the end, but with the need to up the game really, and please don't keep us hanging again until the last minute.
Sanjay Suri there from Paris. And of course, all eyes on Manu Bhaker today as well. And in more news now from back home, a massive landslide has hit Kerala's Wayanad region earlier this morning. Several hundreds are feared trapped under the debris. The Kerala State Disaster Management has reported that fire forces and NDRF teams have been deployed at the impacted areas. All the rescue efforts are underway. Heavy rains have slowed down the progress. And in more news updates now, more than 10 coaches of a Howrah to Mumbai mail train derailed in Jharkhand earlier this morning after colliding with a goods train. Authorities say at least 6 persons have been injured following the collision. The Jharkhand government has confirmed that emergency response teams have been dispatched to the scene to assist with the rescue and relief efforts. And that's all we have on this edition of Power Breakfast. From me and the team that put this show together, thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call takes the action forward.